Hello friends, we are back to present another classic scenario from the ASL system, Scenario H, Escape from Velikiye Luki, a scenario that can be downloaded for free from the MMP publishing website. Since it is free, we will be able to present the scenario card in its entirety without property rights concern. Background: Velikiye Luki, Russia, 12th January 1943. During the fateful winter of 1943, the German disaster was not limited to Stalingrad alone. All along the line, the Russians were creating pockets of Germans. In Velikiye Luki, the entire 277th Infantry Regiment was in trouble. Encircled and with no further possibility of relief, it was all over for the 277th. The Russians were tightening the siege. Elements of 4 rifle regiments with massive artillery and armored support had broken through the perimeter and were now massacring what was left of the unit. While the headquarters was being invaded, the German commander gave the order for all who could save themselves to do so. As night fell, isolated groups of Germans made their way to friendly lines about 10 miles away. The map. This scenario is huge, with maps 4, 2 and 3 adjusted so that the north direction is positioned to the right of the map. In this scenario we will use the vise module of the vessel application, which has a special filter for night conditions, which will greatly facilitate the visualization of the peculiarities involved in the use of night rules. Order of battle. The Soviet units consisting of elements of the 3rd Battalion of the 129th Rifle Regiment will begin deploying their units on maps 2 and 3. This unit will consist of 13 first-class squads and will have leaders 9-1 and 8-0. They will have a medium machine gun with a carrying score of 5 pp and 3 light machine guns as support weapons. Since the scenario will take place at night, some special rules apply during setup. These units will have a number of concealment markers equivalent to the number of squads, that is, 13. With this, after placing the units on the board, they will be able to use the remaining concealment markers as fictitious units to be distributed over the map. In addition, they will be able to have 25%, fractions rounded up, of their units placed with the initial hidden position, hip. In this scenario, they will be able to hide 4 squads in addition to any leaders and support weapons that accompany them. The Soviets' ELR is 3. The Soviet sniper activation number, SAN, is 4, increased to 6 due to the night rules. The German forces, made up of elements of the 1st Company of the 2nd Battalion of the 277th Infantry Regiment, will begin the battle outside the board near the eastern edge of the scenario, and will have 5 first-class units, leaders 10-2, 9-1 and 8-1. As support weapons, they will have 4 light machine guns. As attackers in the night scenario, they will have a device called cloaking, where the units will be initially placed outside the board and will be represented by a cloaking marker during the game. This type of marker gives the units that use it some specific advantages, among them the possibility of a greater number of movement points, 6, which is very advantageous in night scenarios, in addition to using a usual expenditure of movement points to enter concealment terrains, woods and buildings, while units that do not have this marker will have to spend an additional point to enter these terrains. This way, A unit will spend only 2 movement points to penetrate a forest or building, while the other units will spend the usual 2 points plus 1 more. The ELR of the German units will be 4. The SAN of the Germans will be 2, increased to 6 due to the night rules. Special Scenario Rules. Environmental Conditions, EC Snow, Rule E3.7, with ground snow, Rule E3.72, and no wind at the start. Night Rules, E1, are in effect. The base night vision range, NVR, is 6 without cloud cover and without a moon. This means that the vision range of the units on the board is up to 6 hexes away, unless the hex where they are located is illuminated by some lighting device, which we will see during the battle. The Germans are the scenario attacker. Exception: the Germans receive 2 cloaking counters per squad instead of 1, Rule E1.411, a total of 10 cloaking markers. The Russians are the defenders in this scenario. The majority squad type on both sides is normal. All German units are stealthy while all Russian units are lax, with implications for the performance of these units. All units have winter camouflage, Rule E3.712. Rule E3.712, in any type of snow, any unit vehicle, not PRC, specified as having winter camouflage receives a +1 lb hindrance DRM when fired upon beyond 8 hexes if infantry unless it already qualifies for a positive TEM other than smoke. Such a unit also receives a -1 DRM to its concealment DR, Rule A12.122. Winter camouflaged units may assault move or advance into open ground regardless of range from enemy units without loss of concealment. Victory conditions. The Germans win immediately upon evacuating 8 or more victory points across the western border. Consequences. The weakest part of the Soviet corridor was to the southwest in the area of the 129th Rifle Regiment. There, a few groups managed to escape the tightening encirclement, though they did not emerge from it in no way looking like a fighting formation. Company A of the 2nd Battalion, in its attempt, lost all but a single squad and a handful of officers. Technically, it was a disaster of the first magnitude, but the fact that someone had survived made it a source, albeit small, of considerable hope for those who would face the same situation in the months to come. Setup. Some considerations are due regarding the initial setup of the Soviet units. Perhaps the main one is that these units will not start the battle with freedom to move and will be placed on a no-move marker. In order for these units to be able to gain freedom of movement, they need to fulfill some prerequisites. One of these is to start the movement phase accompanied by a leader who has obtained freedom of movement. At the beginning of the Soviet movement phase, its main leader, 9-1, will roll a die, and if the result is less than the ELR, in this case 1 or 2, this leader and all the units accompanying him will be able to move freely for the rest of the game. With this in mind, we will try to create a stack with this leader with the maximum number of squads allowed per hex, 3. This stack should not be positioned too far forward, so that in case the die result is not successful, it will not be in a position too far behind the advancing enemy. In this case, we will position this stack at elevation level 2, hex 3W6. Once this leader is activated, He will be able to activate other German units as long as he starts the next movement phase next to these units. With this concern in mind, some stacks should be positioned further back, but close enough to this activated leader so that they can be reached during the movement and/or advance phases, as is the case with the stack next to leader 80 in Hex 3S3. Another way for units to gain freedom of movement is to be attacked by enemy units, which the Germans will try to avoid as much as possible. Some dummy units will be set up further forward to deceive the advancing German forces, while some squads will be distributed among these dummy markers to identify and attack the advancing enemy. The Soviets are allowed 4 squads to be positioned hidden, plus the leaders and support weapons that eventually accompany them, and they choose the units in 3I8 on the left flank of the German advance, the unit in 3P8 and at the first level of 3T6 in the central area, and the unit in 3CC5 in the sector of the right flank of the enemy advance. The Germans choose an avenue of advance in the most central portion of the map, with dummy units arranged close to the real units. These dummy units will act as piranha oxen and will advance trying to attract enemy fire, identify the hidden Soviet positions, as well as the dummy enemy units. The Germans will try to keep the cloaking markers as long as possible, due to the enormous advantages they obtain in terms of movement through the concealment terrain, as we saw previously. The night rules imply a series of peculiar aspects that will be addressed according to the situations in which they apply and occur during the development of the scenario. Rally phase German turn 1. If a red die rolls a 6 when checking for wind change, there is a possibility that there will be an increase or decrease in the visual valor range (NVR) of night conditions. This will apply from the next turn onwards, and if this type of event occurs, we will investigate the issue in more detail. Wind change 7. No wind change. Prep fire phase. No actions. Movement phase. Cloaking unit H moves to 3H10 where it must roll 2 dice to check for straying, and at this point, we will delve into the details of the straying rules. Rule E1.53 Stray. The biggest problem with night attacks from an attacker's point of view was the coordination of his units. Units straying off course or mistaking objectives were common occurrences and made it difficult for all but the most experienced night fighters to launch coordinated attacks. Each ground unit or stack that wishes to move to a new hex in the movement phase must first make a movement dice roll, without the aid of leader modifiers. If the colored die of the movement DR is 6, that unit stack is subject to straying, otherwise, it may move normally. A lax unit or stack automatically strays if the colored die of the movement dice roll is 6. A normal unit or stack strays only if the white die of the movement DR is greater than or equal to 3, and a stealthy unit or stack strays only if the white die of the movement DR is greater than or equal to 5, which is the case for the Germans. Rule 1.531 Exceptions. A unit or stack that, at the start of its movement phase, wishes to enter a sewer tunnel, wishes to move within the same hex, can see a known enemy unit, is currently in or adjacent to a trench, bunker, road, path, ravine, stream, riverbank or illuminated location, does not make a movement DR until it is no longer in or adjacent to such terrain, at which point it must immediately make a movement DR if it is still moving. A unit stack that enters from outside the board in movement phase does not need to make a movement DR until it actually enters the board, at which point it is subject to all the straying rules. Well, the German unit wishes to move to 3G10, and since this movement will not enter a hex that is exempt from straying, as previously mentioned, it must make a straying dice roll. 9, 5, 4. The unit is not lost and can move to 3G10. In this hex, it is within the Soviets' range of vision at 3I8, 3 hexes away. At this point, the Soviets will attempt to launch an illumination device called a starshell. The Soviets' idea is to launch this starshell over the German unit, and for this to happen, it will be necessary to roll one die, with a result less than or equal to being required to launch the starshell. 6. The Soviet squad is unsuccessful and does not suffer the loss of hidden status. If successful, it would lose its hidden condition and be under the concealment marker. The Soviet unit will attack the Germans with 4 firepower, reduced to 2 by the cloaking marker, -2, FFMO, FFNAM, +1, hindrance due to night conditions. The Soviets lose their hidden condition and receive a first fire marker that, when placed over this unit, displays an effect called gunflash, illuminating this hex. When the Soviets fire, they must lose the concealment marker, as long as they are within line of sight of an enemy unit in good order, which in this specific case, the German unit is dummy, which does not qualify it as in good order, so Jim chooses to keep the concealment marker until the Germans prove that they have a unit in good order with line of sight on the Soviets under the gunflash. 7-1, 6. Pin test check that causes this German unit to lose the cloaking marker, showing that it is a dummy unit, being eliminated from the board, and a marker of 1 residual fire on the attacked hex. Unit F enters 3FF10. With the desire to move to FF9, it will need to roll a movement die. Colored die less than 6, it can move to FF9. A new roll is made to evaluate the possibility of straying in the movement to FF8. Colored die less than 6, the unit can move without straying. A new roll of dice to evaluate straying to FF7. 1, 5, can move with the expenditure of a total of 4 movement factors. At this moment, the F marker enters the line of sight of the Soviet unit in 3CC6 that will attempt to launch a starshell at 3FF7, needing to roll less in the roll of 1 die, losing the hip element. 1. Success. New roll to check in which hex the starshell will be deposited. 2. 6. 2 is the direction, 6 the distance, and unfortunately the starshell will be deposited outside the map, not affecting the lighting conditions on the board. The Soviet squad will fire on the Germans from 4 hexes away with 2 firepower, cloaked Germans, +1, night hindrance, -2, FFMO, FFNAM. The Soviets do not lose the cloaking marker because the Germans cannot prove that they have a unit in good order within sight range. 5-1, 4, 1 morale check. And the Germans lose their cloaking, and since there are no units under this marker, it is eliminated from the map. 1 residual fire is deposited in the attacked hex. The German unit de-advances to the board. Dice roll to assess the possibility of straying. 3. 6. There is no strain, and the German unit can advance to FF9. A new dice roll to assess the possibility of moving to FF8 without strain. In this hex, the German unit now has line of sight on the Soviets at 3cc6. Since the Soviets are illuminated by the gun flash, they lose the marker of concealment, since the Germans can prove that they have a unit in good order under the cloaking marker. Jim does not do this at this time, but he will correct this detail later. Once the Germans have line of sight to a known enemy unit, CC6, they do not need to roll dice to assess strain and can end their movement at GG7, spending a total of 6 movement factors. Dummy German unit I enters the board 3N10. Since it wants to move to N9, it rolls the movement dice. 3, 6, it can move to N9. In this hex, they are under line of sight of the Soviet hip unit in P8, which will attempt to launch a starshell at M10 needing 2 or less to succeed. 6. Unsuccessful, and this way the Soviets do not lose the condition to remain hidden. The Soviets waive their hidden condition and will fire on Unit I with 2 firepower, cloaking, +1, hindrance due to night conditions, +1, woods, -1, FFNA. With this shot they cause the gun flash in the hex, and would lose the concealment condition if the Germans could prove the presence of a unit in good order, which is not the case. 8 + 1, 9, failure. The 1 residual fire marker is deposited on the attacked hex. The Germans will advance to 3N8, rolling the dice to assess strain. 2, 1, the Germans advance, ending the movement. Dummy unit G enters the board and rolls the dice for movement. 1, 3, can move to M9. 3, 2, can move to M8, ending the movement in this phase. Markers A and C perform the entire ritual and end the movement in M8. Dummy unit J enters the board and can finish its movement at V8 without incident. Units B and E proceed to hexes T9 and U8 respectively, without major setbacks. Defensive fire phase. No actions. Advance fire phase. No actions. As discussed initially, the Germans will try to keep the cloaking markers as long as possible due to the movement advantages. The gun flash markers are removed from the map with the elimination of the defensive fire markers but must remain in effect until the end of the close combat phase. Rout phase. No actions. Advance phase. V8 to U8. T8 to S8. U9 to V8. Stacking from M8 to M7. N8 to M8. Close combat phase. The Soviet unit at 3I8 regains the concealment marker. It is not in direct view of any enemy unit. The Soviet unit at 3cc6 does not regain the concealment marker because it is in line of sight of the Germans at 3gg7. Illumination fire markers are removed from the rally phase map of the Soviet phase of the first round. Rally phase of the Soviet first turn. 2-2, no wind change. Prep fire phase. Soviet units will attempt to launch starshell. Unit at 3I8 will attempt to launch a starshell at L7 requiring 2 or less to succeed. 3. Fail. Unit at 3P8 will attempt to launch a starshell at M8 from 3 hexes away. 6. Fail. Squad at M3 attempts to launch Starshell at M8 3 hexes away. 2. Success. The squad does lose the concealment marker. In this case, a new roll, now with 2 dice, will be made to check the deviation the Starshell positioning will suffer, with the value of the colored die indicating the direction and the white die showing the distance of the deviation. Unfortunately, with the result 4, 6, it implies a deviation off the board without impacting the units on the board. Leader 9-1 in R6 will attempt to launch a Starshell at O8 requiring 4 or less. 4. Success. Subsequent roll of the dice to check the deviation of the Starshell. 2, 3. The Starshell will be deposited on hex 3T6 on the building where this leader is located. Soviet leader in 3S3 will attempt to launch a Starshell at P4. 3. Success. Subsequent roll of the dice to determine the deviation in the position of the Starshell. 5, 6, and the Starshell falls on 3J7. The squad in 3CC5 tries to place a Starshell in FF6 and with a result of 5, fails. Movement phase. The best Soviet leader will try to gain freedom of movement. For this to happen, the leader will need to get a 1 or 2 on the roll of 1 die. If successful, this leader will grant freedom of movement to himself and the squad that is with him. 1. Success, and the leader and the squad gain freedom of movement. The no-move marker is removed from the hex. The leader takes advantage of the newly gained freedom and moves towards the Soviet stack in 3S3 where he will grant this freedom to the units positioned there. Since the hexes on the path are illuminated, it is not necessary to roll dice to check for the possibility of misplacement. Defensive fire phase. Continuing with the policy of the German units to maintain the cloaking marker, they refrain from attacking the enemy. Advancing fire phase. The unit in 3M5 fires on the stack in M7 with 1 firepower, 4 reduced to 2 by advancing fire, halved by German units' concealment marker. Modifiers will be +1, night hindrance, +2, wooden house. 7 + 3, 10, is a miss. Rout phase. No actions. Advance phase. No actions. Close combat phase. No units qualify to recover the concealment marker. Illumination markers are removed. Rally phase of the German second turn. At this point, we will end this match, where the night rules are in effect. The German units try to keep the cloaking marker for as long as possible in the direction of the map exit. To retreat from the map, the German squads will have to travel 31 hexes as the eagles fly, which will require at least 5 turns using the cloaking moving advantage, 6 mf in the movement phase plus 1 mf in the advance phase. If they lose this marker, it will take at least 6 phases, so time is not in the Germans' favor. On the other hand, the Soviet units are considered lax, which among the characteristics of being lax is a huge chance of straying. Welcome folks to the second round of this night fight where desperate German units try to escape the encirclement by Soviet forces in the Velikiye Luki area in the winter of 1943. So far, the Germans have been moving with extreme caution so as not to lose the advantages associated with maintaining the cloaking marker, which provides advantages in relation to movement in common terrain, 6 movement factors, and in concealment terrain, buildings and woods, where they do not need to use 1 extra movement factor to advance through these terrains. In addition to the movement advantages, there is the fact of receiving fire from Soviet units with half firepower. So far, the Soviets have managed to eliminate only a few dummy units, failing to eliminate the cloaking of any real unit. On the other hand, the main Soviet leader, 9-1, and the unit he accompanied managed to obtain the important freedom of movement and will be able to move freely through the terrain. The 9-1 leader is already with the Soviet stack in 3S3, where he will help the 8-0 leader and the squad that accompanies him to achieve freedom of movement in the next Soviet movement phase. With this background, let's resume the battle. Rally phase, German turn 2. Wind change. 6-2. There is no wind change, but since the colored die resulted in 6, there is a possibility of a change in night vision range. The value of the white die will determine the change in this variable. 1 to 3 reduction in visibility by 1 point, 4 no change, 5 to 6 increase in visibility by 1 point. Since the result of the white die was 2, there is a reduction in night vision range, which decreases from 6 to 5 hexes. Prep fire phase. The Germans will not fire in the prep fire phase, nor will they launch starshells to try to maintain the cloaking markers. Movement phase. On the other hand, the Soviets will try to launch as many starshells as possible to try to illuminate the possible German movement routes, which will cause the loss or, at least, will facilitate the elimination of the protection of the enemy's cloaking markers. The Soviet unit in 3I-8 will attempt to launch a starshell 3 hexes away distance, over hex L7, needing to or less on a die roll to succeed. 3. It's a failure. Unit at 3M5 will attempt to throw the starshell at M8. 3. Failure. 3P8 attempts a starshell at M8. 4. Failure. 3R6 attempts a starshell at O7. 3. Failure. 3E4 at H5. 1. First successful Soviet starshell throw. Now, they will roll 2 dice to determine the deviation of this starshell, with the red die giving the direction and the white one the distance. 6. 3. And the starshell will be positioned over the unit that threw the artifact. Leader at 3S3 attempts the attempt at S6. Leaders need 4 or less to succeed. 2. Success. Let's determine the deviation. 3. 5 and the starshell will be deposited over X8. 3W6 will attempt to throw the starshell over its own hex. The advantage of this throw, its own hex, is that the starshell only deviates by 1 hex. 1. Success. 1. 6 and the starshell should be positioned at 3W5, but Jim makes a mistake and deposits the starshell at T1 using the rule of launching at 3 hexes away. 3 CC5 at FF6. 3. Failure.
2 on A1.
1. Success. 1. 6 and the starshell is positioned at 2H8.
2 on 3 1.
1. Success. 6. 6 and the star shell is deposited at 2 times 2. The Germans will move Unit J from 3U8 to T7. At this moment it suffers an attack from the Soviet unit at T6, which loses its hidden status. There is a German unit in good order with line of sight on the Soviets, gun flash effect. This shot will have 4 firepower, doubled because it is a point-blank shot, reduced again to 4 because the German unit is close. The modifiers will be +1, hindrance due to night conditions, +1, forest, -1, FFNA. 5 +1, 6, normal morale check. The German unit loses the cloaking marker, and since there is no unit under this marker, it is eliminated from the scenario and the residual fire is deposited on the attacked hex. 3V8 to Z8. Since these hexes are illuminated, there is no need to roll dice to evaluate stray. These Germans do not lose their cloaking because there is no Soviet unit in good order with line of sight over the movement of Unit B. 3S9 to U9. This hex suffers an attack from 3W6 with 8 firepower, reduced to 4 by the German cloaking, with the modifiers of +1, night vision hindrance, -2, FFMO, FFNA. The Soviet units lose their concealment. 5 -1, 4, 1 morale check, and the Germans lose their cloaking. 6 +1, 7, the German unit is pinned, and there is a possibility of the Soviet sniper activating. 2 residual fire is placed on the attacked hex. The Soviet sniper will be activated on a result of 1 or 2. 4. The sniper is not activated. Cloaking I from 3M8 to I5. Cloaking G from 3M7 to N6, where it suffers an attack from the Soviets in M5. With 4 firepower reduced to 2, cloaking, +1, night hindrance, -2, FFMO, FFNA. 10 -1, 9, failure, and the German unit continues to 304. The cloaking units see and a move to 3J4. In this movement they should have rolled dice to evaluate the stray between hexes 3M7 to L6 and from L6 to K6. Cloaking D in 3GG7 rolls the dice to assist stray to move to GG6. 2, 1, no stray. 3GG6 suffers an attack from CC5 with 4 firepower, +1, night hindrance, -2, FFMO, FFNA. 4 -1, 3, 2 morale check. The Germans lose cloaking and there is the possibility of activating the German sniper. 6 +2, 8. The German squad should have its morale broken, but Jim only considers it pinned. There is a possibility of activating the Soviet sniper. 5 and 5, no sniper is activated. Defensive fire phase. No actions. Advancing fire phase. No actions. The star shell and gunlash markers should be eliminated from the end of the advancing fire phase. Rout phase. No actions. Advance phase. 3J4 to J3 and K4. 3I5 to I4. 304 to O3. 3Z8 to Y8 entering the square where the Soviet unit is shown be dummy and is eliminated. Close combat phase. The Soviet unit at 3cc5 regains the concealment marker because night rules apply, and the only enemy unit with direct line of sight of this unit is pinned at 3gg6, not a unit in good order. Rally phase of the Soviet second turn. Wind change. 2, 3 without wind change. Prep fire phase. The Soviets will launch starshells.
3-8 on vise.
1. Success. 2, 5 and the starshell is placed on 303. 3e4 for h4. 4. Failure.
3-5 on 3.
6. Failure.
3-8 on 7.
3. Failure.
2-2 on 1.
2. Success. 6. 4 and the starshell is deposited on hex y3.
3-6 on 8.
1. Success. 3. 3 the starshell is deposited on hex 3z9.
3-5 on 5.
3. Failure. Leader at 3s3 over p3. 5. Fail. Soviet unit 3cc5 gives up the cloaking marker and will fire on the German squad in gg6 with 4 firepower with the modifier of +1. Night vision hindrance. 7 + 1, 8. It is a miss. Soviet stack in 3w6 fires on y8 with 4 firepower, cloaking, +1, night light hindrance, +2, FFMO, FFNA. 5 + 3, 8, which would be a failure, but Jim harms the Germans and considers it as normal morale check and eliminates the cloaking marker of this unit. The leader and the squad pass. There is a possibility of activating the Soviet sniper. 6. The sniper is not activated. Stack in 3s5 consisting of the leader 8-1, the squad 447 and the medium machine gun on the cloaking G with 4 firepower, cloaking, +1, night vision hindrance, -1, leader. The German unit did not request the wall advantage and will not count on the modifier of this protection modality. 5, 6, unsuccessful. The machine gun loses its rate of fire. Movement phase. Soviet units in 3s5 that accompany the leader 9-1 gain freedom of movement. The leader 9-1 moves to 3v5. Squad in 3t6 becomes cx and moves to 3u4. In this movement there is no need to roll the dice to evaluate stray because this squad moves through an illuminated sector of the scenario. Defensive fire phase. 3y8 will fire on w6 with 6 firepower +1, height advantage -1, FFMO -1, leader. 6 -1, 5, 1 morale check. The machine gun loses its rate of fire and there is a possibility of activating the Soviet sniper. 8 + 1, 9, the first squad breaks. 4 + 1, 5, the squad with the machine gun passes. There is a possible activation of the German sniper. These Soviet units attacked by the Germans gain freedom of movement. 3GG6 fires on the Soviet squad in CC5 with 4 firepower +2 wooden house. 5 + 2, 7, pin test check. 6. The Soviet squad passes. Advancing fire phase. No actions, the starshell and gun flash markers are removed. Rout phase. At night, Failure to rout does not eliminate a broken unit, nor does a broken unit surrender via rout phase method, even if disrupted. Rules E1.54, ASOP 6.12b, ASOP 6.21b. Thus, a broken unit can remain in open ground in the loss and normal range of a known enemy unit. A broken unit can also remain adjacent to a known enemy unit, Rule E, C 1.54. It can even remain in the same location with a known enemy unit. If a broken unit, under DAIM, wants to rout, it still can, but only using low crawl, Rule E, C 1.54. Further, it is not required to route toward the nearest building woods at night. It can low crawl in any direction. The only restriction is that it can't route toward a known enemy unit. Illumination of a location does not affect route into that location. Because all route is low crawl, there is no interdiction at night. Thus, the Soviet unit with broken morale at 3W6 chooses to remain in this location, ending the rout phase. Advance phase. Stat with leader 8-0 and squad with the MMG moves to the upper floor at 3S3. Leader 9-1 moves to 3W6. 3U4 to U3. Close combat phase. Unit at 3T6 recovers the concealment marker. Rally phase, German turn 3. Alright friends, let's end this clip with the Germans quickly advancing on the left flank towards board 2. The German units on the right flank are in trouble, having lost their cloaking marker. The Soviets have fulfilled part of their priorities, which is to eliminate the Germans' cloaking markers and gain freedom of movement, which will allow them to move freely around the scenario. Rally phase, German turn 3. Wind change. 3. No wind change. Soviet unit attempts to rally at 3W6. Modifiers are +4, DAIM, -1, leader. 8 + 3, 11, morale is not restored, and the DAIM marker remains on the Soviet unit. During night conditions, if the dice roll results in a number higher than the unit's morale, the unit remains under the DAIM marker. Prep fire phase. No actions. Movement phase. Soviet units will attempt to launch starshells. Unit at 3E4 succeeds and launches a starshell at H4, which diverts to H6. Leader at 3S3 successfully launches a starshell at P2, which diverts to P4. Squad at 3CC5 successfully launches a starshell at R7, which then diverts to U10. German squad from GG6 to GG5 in assault movement. In this hex they suffer an attack with 4 firepower from 3CC5 with the +1 modifiers, night conditions, -1 for FFNA. 2, this unit is covered, and the result will be evaluated in the 2 firepower column, 1 morale check, and there is the possibility of activating the German sniper. 11 + 1, 12, and the German squad breaks above the ELR, being reduced to second class 447. Roll for German sniper activation. 1. The major sniper is activated. 3, 5, and this sniper should have moved to hex 3Y8 and should attack the stack with the leader 9-1 in W6. However, Jim makes a mistake and positions the sniper in 3Z8, and the Soviet units in W6 and DD8 are equidistant from the sniper. The unit to be attacked in this case is the one with the highest protection factor, in this case the dummy stack in DD8 that is within the protection of the woods, which is then eliminated. German stack in 3Y8 becomes CX and moves to 3FF4, rolls dice to assist stray to enter hexes BB9, CC10, DD9, E9, FF8 and FF7. Squad in 3U9 to S9. Cloaking G of 303 moves to M1, rolls dice to assist stray entering N1 and M1. Cloaking I moves from 3I4 to I1, rolls dice to assist stray to enter hexes I2 and I1, and here Jim makes another mistake and advances to the current position using 7 movement factors when he could have used only 6 movement factors. Cloaking A moves from 3J3 to K1. Cloaking C moves from 3K4 to K1. These last 2 units do not require the need to assist stray because they always move through hexes adjacent to the row. Defensive fire phase. No actions. Advancing fire phase. Stacking in 3FF7 fires on CC5 with 2 firepower plus 2, wooden house, plus 1, CX, minus 1, leader. In this case the plus 1 modifier will not be used due to the hindrance caused by night conditions, as the Soviets are in a location at least 1 level above the attacker. The attacked unit does not need to be at a higher level, only the height of the terrain feature, woods, needs to be 1 level higher. In this case the Germans are attacking a structure that has a height of 1 while they are at level 0. 11 plus 2, 13, failure. End of advancing fire phase. Starshell and gun flash markers are eliminated. Rout phase. Squad in 3GG5 to GG4. Advance phase. Stacking from 3FF7 to GG7. Squad from 3S9 to R8. Cloakings A and C from 3K1 to 2V0. Cloaking I from 2X0 to W1. Cloaking G from 3M1 to 2V0. Close combat phase. The squad in 3R8 should have gained the concealment marker. Rally phase. Soviet turn 3. Wind change. 5-2, no wind change. Soviet units rally attempt at 3W6 with modifiers of +4, D-aim, -1, leader. 4-6, the squad does not recover morale and keeps the D-aim marker because, according to night rules, units that do not recover morale and have a dice result higher than the morale keep the D-aim marker. Prep fire phase. Soviet Starshell launch attempt. Unit at 2R2 successfully launches a Starshell on U1 which diverts to 3J1. Leader at 3W6 successfully launches a Starshell on his own hex. This Starshell diverts 1 hex to 3V5. Squad fires at 3 CC5 on the German stack at 3 GG7 with 4 firepower plus 1 woods. Hindrance due to night conditions does not occur here because the woods where the German stack is located are level 1 level above the unit that fires. 9 plus 1, 10, failure. Movement phase. Leader 8-0 in 3S3 becomes CX and moves to N4. The squad with the medium machine gun moves from 3S3 to Q1. This unit carries a machine gun that requires 4 portage points to carry it. During the night, these machine guns are moved as if they only required 3 PPS, but should be carried dismounted whenever possible, which Jim forgot. Squad into U3 moves to Y2. Squad with light machine gun in 3W6 becomes CX and moves to Y1. Leader 9-1 moves from 3W6 to the lower floor at T6. Defensive fire phase. Firing from 3GG7 on CC5 with 6 firepower plus 2, wooden house, -1, leader. 9 plus 1, 10, failure. Advancing fire phase. No actions. The star shell and gunfire markers should be eliminated when end of this phase. Rout phase. Squad in 3W6 moves in low crawl to V5. Advance phase. Leader from 3N4 to M5. Leader 9-1 to upper level of 3T6. Squad from 3CC5 to BB5. Squad from 3Y1 to I1. Squad from 3Y2 to Y1. Squad from to Q1 to Q2. Close combat phase. The German unit in 3R8 should again regain concealment, and Jim ignores it again, but will correct it next turn. Rally phase German 4th turn. Wind change. 5, 6, 11, no wind change. German squad attempts to auto-rally at 3 GG4 with the modifiers of +1, auto-rally, -1, woods. 2, 5, 7, the unit does not recover morale, and the DAIM marker can be removed since the dice roll of 7 is equal to the unit's morale. Prep fire phase. No actions. Movement phase. Soviet units can launch Starship. We will only show the situations in which this activity was successful. Leader at 3Q6 successfully launches a star shell over R8 which deflects to M6. Leader 8-0 successfully launches a star shell over 3L2 which subsequently deflects to Z0. Squad at 2Q2 launches a star shell over 3T1 which deflects to S2. Squad at 2I1 launches a star shell over 3BB1 which deflects to GG4. Cloaking I moves to 2W2. In this hex it suffers an attack from 2A4 at 4 hexes away with 4 firepower reduced to 2, cloaking. The modifiers will be +1, night vision hindrance, +1, woods, -1, FF nail. The shot will be 2 firepower +1. 7 +1, 6, fail. Since the German unit spent 2 movement factors, the Soviets can perform the subsequent first fire with 1 firepower +1. 4 +1, 5, pin test check, with the elimination of cloaking eye, dummy, and there would be a possible activation of the German sniper, which Jim does not perform. Cloaking G moves to 2v2. In this hex it suffers an attack from 2r2 at 23 hexes away with 2 firepower, cloaking, +1, night vision hindrance, +1, woods, -1, FFNA. 3 +1, 4, 1 morale check and cloaking G, dummy, is eliminated. The residual fire should be only 1. Cloaking C moves to 2v3 without being bothered. Cloaking A follows the same path without any changes. Squad in 3R8 moves to S9 spending 3 movement factors to enter the woods. This unit no longer has the advantage of cloaking and must spend 1 more movement factor to enter concealment terrain, woods, buildings. This squad intends to move towards 3T8 and should roll the dice to assess the possibility of deviation, since it does not move in an illuminated area, in an adjacent hex or on a road or with line of sight of an enemy under gun flash. Stacking in 3GG7 moves to GG6. In this hex it suffers an attack from 3CC5, 5 hexes away, with 2 firepower, distance greater than 4 hexes, ideal range for the Soviet squad, +1, night hindrance, -1, FFNA. 6. No modifiers, pin test check. 10. German leader is pin. 7. Squad passes and can progress to 3GG4, but Jim keeps this squad with the leader. Defensive fire phase. No actions. Advancing fire phase. No actions. Rout phase. Soviet squad in 3v5 can rout to U6. Jim allows this squad to move to 3W6, which is illegal because under night rules, squads can only move in low crawl, so they should stop moving at U6. With the end of the advancing phase, the starshell and gunflash markers should be eliminated. Advance phase. German squad in 3GG6 to GG5. Squad in 3T8 to U9. Cloakings A and C move to 2v4. Close combat phase. Soviet squads in 2A4, R2Q2 and I1 regain their cloaking markers. Rally phase Soviet 4th turn. Wind change. 6-1 There is no wind change, however, since the result of the colored die is 6, there is a change in the night vision range, NVR. The white die is 1, so the night vision range is reduced to 4, which will mainly benefit the German units A and C that are already escaping of the Soviets across the road on board 2. Soviet squad attempts to rally at 3W6 with modifiers of +4, D-aim, +1, auto-rally, -1 building. 8. Squad fails to recover morale and keeps the D-aim marker. Prep fire phase. Some Soviet units attempt to launch starshells. No unit succeeds in this action. Movement phase. Squad at 3M5 becomes CX and moves to Q1. Squad with the light machine gun at 2I1 moves to 3E1. Squad at 3Y1 becomes CX and moves to 2M2. Squad with the medium machine gun at 2Q2 to T2. Stacking with leader 9-1 at 3T6 becomes CX and moves to R2. Leader 8-0 at 3T moves to P7. Squad at 3CC5 becomes CX and moves to Y2. Defensive fire phase. No actions. Advancing fire phase. No actions. Rout phase. No actions. Advance phase. Squad in T2 to U3. Squad in 3Q1 to Q1. Squad with leader 9-1 from 3R2 to Q2. Leader in 3P7 to P8. Squad in 2E1 to 3CC1. Squad in 3Y2 to Y1. Squad in 2N to 2N1. Close combat phase. German leader in 3GG6 recovers the cloaking marker. Rally phase German 5th turn. This concludes this clip, where we find the Germans with at least 9 victory points, cloaking A and C, escaping the clutches of the Soviet units on board too. With only 8 victory points needed for victory, it seems that the Germans will win this scenario, since by keeping the cloaking marker they gain a large advantage over the Soviet units, and if a straying event does not occur, they should be able to escape through the western edge of the scenario around the 8th turn. Some lessons can be learned from the evolution of the battle so far. The Soviets were wrong to place their units so far forward in this scenario because, despite having managed to gain freedom of movement in the first Soviet turn, they were unable to eliminate the German advantage related to the cloaking marker, which allowed the Germans to escape through the advanced Soviet positions, reaching the unguarded Soviet rearguard during the 5th turn. The only obstacle to the inevitable German victory is the possibility of units A or C suffer strain. The probability of this occurring is minimal, as it requires rolling a 6 on the colored die associated with a roll of 5 or 6 on the white die, as these are units considered stealthy, while simply rolling a 6 on the colored die implies straying for the Soviet units, as they are considered lax. A search on the ROR, Remote Online Automated Record, website showed 34 German victories against 23 Soviet victories for Scenario H, published by General Magazine, Volume 24, Number 1. On the ASL Archives website with the most updated version of Scenario H shows that in 26 recorded matches, there were 18 Soviet victories against only 5 German victories. Jim used this latest version, which is available on the MMP publishing website. In this way, the Soviets concede the victory to the Germans and request a rematch with the Germans, in which they will try to get a better positioning. See you in the rematch. Namaste.